Carol Dupree thought it was just a folded piece of cardboard until she opened it. Until she read what a 71-year-old Vietnam veteran had pressed into the page in pencil 6 weeks before his son drove him to a highway motel at midnight, said, "I'll be right back," and never came back. The words were simple, 9 of them, that changed everything. The policy clears in February. Nature takes its course. That note had been written 19 days before a $310,000 life insurance policy was set to pay out. 19 days before Raymond Earl Booker, Navy Corpsman, Purple Heart, 2 tours in Vietnam, was supposed to quietly disappear. What happened after Carol made one phone call at 3 a.m. would bring 183 Hell's Angels to a Tennessee highway before sunrise. This is Raymond's story. And February came and went. Before we go further, please subscribe to Valiant Bikers and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. This happened in Tennessee. But what happened to Raymond happens in every state, in every county, behind doors that look perfectly ordinary from the outside. Comment "I stand with Raymond" if you believe this veteran deserved better. Now let's continue. He said he'd be right back. That was 9 hours ago. Carol Dupree set down her pen. Not slowly, not dramatically, just set it down. The way you do when something requires your complete attention and you have just realized you have not been giving it. She had worked the night shift at the Clearwater Budget Inn for 11 years. 11 years of Highway 70 at midnight, of burnt coffee and distant semis, of guests who paid cash and asked nothing and were gone by dawn. She thought she had seen most things. She had not seen this. The man in the southeast corner of the lobby was 71 years old. He had arrived at 6 in the evening when his son checked him into room 114, carried one bag to the door, said, "I'll be right back with the rest of your things," and drove away. 9 hours ago. His name was Raymond Earl Booker, once 5 feet 11 inches with the kind of build that carried authority. Now 139 pounds on a frame built to carry 178. And the subtraction of it was visible in the way his clothes hung, in the hollow at his temples, in the skin of his hands gone cracked and dry from months of inadequate heat and inadequate care. He wore a surplus army jacket that had belonged to his father. He had worn it every winter for 31 years, not because it still fit perfectly, but because it remembered everything. The left elbow had been repaired with electrical tape. His right boot sole was separating at the toe, held together with a rubber band. His gray eyes tracked the front door every 4 to 6 minutes, not anxiously, methodically. The trained observation of a man who spent 2 tours in Vietnam as a Navy corpsman, the one who runs toward the wounded when everyone else runs away. He kept his one bag on his lap, both hands resting on top of it, the way you hold the last thing that still belongs to you. The ice machine in the hall cycled on, a mechanical shudder, then a rush, then silence. Carol had offered him coffee 3 times over 9 hours. He'd accepted once, held the cup more for warmth than anything. The second and third times he declined with the precise, minimal courtesy of a man raised not to impose. At 3:17 a.m., she stopped asking and just walked around the desk. She pulled the spare chair from against the wall, the one facing away from the TV that no guest ever chose, and set it across from Raymond. Sat down. Said nothing. Just present. Raymond looked at her, then at his hands. The ice machine cycled off. Highway 70 was empty. The lobby TV played a muted infomercial, colors shifting silently on the far wall. Then, he said he'd be right back. That was 9 hours ago. 13 words. Completely flat. The voice of a man who had finally, at hour 9, spent the last of the energy required to believe. What lived underneath those words, in the space between them, was something he could not yet say out loud. I still can't bring myself to say he's not coming. Carol did not reach for a phone, did not recite motel policy, did not redirect him to a shelter hotline. She said, "Then you're staying right here until we figure this out." She got up, poured 2 coffees without asking, set one in front of Raymond, sat back down across from him. That was it. No performance. Just, I am here. You are not alone. Raymond wrapped both cracked hands around the cup. Outside, the temperature fell to 17 degrees. The lobby heating unit cycled on, 8 minutes of warmth, then cycled off. The cold came back through the front glass in slow, patient waves. What Carol didn't know yet was that the heating unit was not the only thing running out of time. It started with the small things. "My son brought me here yesterday," Raymond said. "He spoke the way you speak when you have rehearsed something because saying it unrehearsed is too much. Said we were getting a fresh start. Said he'd be back with my things." Carol nodded. Waited. "The house is sold." A pause on each word. "My home, 31 years, on Chestnut Hill Road. Derek sold it 4 months ago. Said it was to pay debts. My things are in a storage unit he controls. I don't have the code." He looked at his hands. "I haven't had access to my own bank account in 11 months. My VA pension goes somewhere I can't reach." The lobby was very quiet. "He has power of attorney," Raymond continued, "since my wife passed, Dorothy, 44 years. His voice did not crack on her name. He had already used up the cracks on something else tonight. "Derek moved in to help after she was gone. Said he wanted to take care of me. I believed him." A beat. "He's my son." The word son landed like something dropped from a significant height. Carol looked at Raymond's hands. The cracked skin. The yellowed, split nails. The bruise on his left temple, faded to greenish yellow. Oval-shaped. 3 weeks old, at least, never treated. She had a son who came home from Iraq in 2009 in pieces, and she had learned, in the years since, to read the difference between a man who had fallen and a man who had been allowed to fall. "Mr. Booker, when did you last see a doctor?" He thought about it. 7 months ago, maybe 8. I take metformin for diabetes. Derek said he was picking it up." A pause. "I don't know if he was." She looked at him. The cracked hands, the temperature outside, an unmanaged diabetic with mild malnutrition sitting in a lobby with a cycling heat unit at 19 degrees. What she did not yet know was how much worse it was about to get. Raymond reached into his jacket, the inside pocket closest to his chest. He produced a folded piece of cardboard, worn at the fold lines from being opened and refolded many times, torn from the cover of a TV guide found in a rental apartment nightstand 6 weeks ago. He set it on the table between them. 6 weeks ago, he said. I was in the back bedroom of an apartment Derek had put me in. I was supposed to be asleep. Derek was in the kitchen on the phone. The walls were thin. His gray eyes were very still now, the still of a man who has made a decision. I heard him say the policy clears in February. He said, same way it worked with Mom. Nobody questioned it then. And then he said, nature takes its course, Kevin. We're just not preventing. The lobby was absolutely quiet. I couldn't reach my phone in time to record it, Raymond said, so I wrote it down. Every word. In the order he said them. I've been carrying it ever since. Carol unfolded the cardboard. The handwriting was deliberate, each word pressed firmly into the page with a pencil stub. The handwriting of a man who understood he might have only one chance to leave a record. The policy clears in February. Same way it worked with Mom. Nature takes its course. We're just not preventing. She looked up. What policy? I didn't know there was one, Raymond said. Not until tonight. 9 hours is a long time to think. He looked at his hands. I think it's on my life. Carol sat with that for 3 full seconds. Then she did the math that Raymond had done alone in a corner chair for 9 hours. February was 19 days away. Whatever Derek had constructed, the isolation, the sold house, the controlled accounts, the abandonment in a motel on a night the temperature was trending toward single digits. It was not random. It was a schedule. And the man sitting across from her, with $23 in his wallet and 4% battery left on his phone and careful pencil words that nobody was supposed to see, was at the end of it. What Raymond didn't know was that Carol had already made her decision. Not after she read the note, before. The moment she pulled that chair across the lobby and sat down. Some decisions don't require all the information. They only require the willingness to stay. There is a law most families don't know exists. In Tennessee, and in 40 other states, what Derek Booker did that evening has a legal name. Criminal abandonment of a dependent adult in Tennessee, Code 39-15-507. It does not require physical harm to qualify as a felony. It requires only intent, and the knowledge that the person being left behind cannot independently survive. Most perpetrators build their entire plan around the assumption that no one knows this law exists. Derek Booker had built his around exactly that assumption. He had miscalculated one thing. He had left his father in a motel where Carol Jean Dupree worked the night shift. Carol picked up her personal phone, not the motel landline, her own. Raymond's jaw tightened, the involuntary flinch of a man who had learned over 11 months that phone calls made near him rarely ended in his favor. I'm not calling your son, Carol said without looking up. She was already typing. She posted to the White County Neighbors Facebook group at 3:34 a.m. I have a 71-year-old Vietnam veteran sitting in my lobby right now. His son dropped him off 9 hours ago and hasn't come back. He has no access to his medications, his bank accounts, or his belongings. He is not okay. If anyone in this group knows someone who can actually help tonight, please, right now, post. Then she set the phone face up on the desk. Raymond looked at the phone, then at her. Why are you doing this? Carol folded her hands. My son came home from Iraq in 2009, she said. Both legs below the knee. 23 years old, didn't know how to ask for help, and I didn't know how to give it. We lost 3 years just being broken next to each other. She paused. Then a group of men on motorcycles showed up at our door. I don't know who called them. I don't know how they found us, but they stayed until my son was okay. They didn't ask for anything. She looked at Raymond steadily. So, that's why. The phone lit up. Then again, then the notifications began arriving faster. The fourth comment, posted at 3:41 a.m., read, Carol, this is Denny. Calling Preacher right now. Gerald Preacher Malone had been president of the Cookeville Hells Angels chapter for 9 years. Before that, he had served 22 years as a chaplain with the 101st Airborne Division. He had left the institutional church. He had not left the mission. He had one standing rule, stated the same way every time anyone asked: we don't escalate. We surround. His phone rang at 3:43 a.m. He answered before the second ring. "Preacher, it's Denny. Talk to me. Clearwater Budget Inn on Highway 70. Right now." The weight of what came next settled into the silence between them. Vietnam vet, 71 years old. Son abandoned him at a highway motel 9 hours ago. No meds, no money, no access to his accounts. There's a note. Preacher. A handwritten note that says the policy clears in February. 3 seconds of silence. A veteran. Navy corpsman, 2 tours, Purple Heart. Say no more. We're coming. The line went dead. No debate. No discussion of what the appropriate channels were. No questions about whether the evidence was sufficient. Just, we're coming. Because that is what Brotherhood means at 3:43 a.m. when a veteran has 19 days and is sitting alone in a motel lobby in January with 17 degrees on the other side of the glass. Preacher made 4 more calls in 6 minutes, each one under 90 seconds, each one ending the same way. Say no more. We're coming. Now, here is what you might be expecting at this point. You might be imagining 183 bikers roaring up to a highway motel, engines at full thunder, looking for a confrontation. That's the image, the assumption, the story that people tell about men who look like this. That is not this story. What Preacher understood, or what 22 years as a chaplain and 9 years leading a chapter had built into him, was that the most powerful thing 183 men on motorcycles could do was not throw a single punch, was not raise a single voice. The strength wasn't in the noise, it was in the number and in what came with it. Discipline, expertise, patience, the willingness to do the slow, methodical work that systems are supposed to do and don't. 4 men arrived first, well ahead of the main group. They pulled into the Clearwater lot at 4:08 a.m. Engines quiet, no ceremony. Preacher walked in first. Behind him, 3 men he had called specifically, before he called anyone else, because what Raymond needed tonight was not just presence, it was precision. The first was 58 years old. Road name: Wire. He had spent 24 years as a financial crimes investigator with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation before he retired 2 years ago. He carried a legal pad and a pen in the inside pocket of his cut at all times. He could read a financial abuse case the way a doctor reads an X-ray. Pattern recognition built from 2 decades of the same crimes, wearing different faces. The second was 67. Road name: Bones. Retired elder law attorney, Tennessee Bar, 30 years of practice. He had filed more emergency guardianship petitions than he could count and could draft one in 4 hours if the evidence justified it. He had read Carol's Facebook post from his kitchen at 3:47 a.m. and was already, in his head, assembling the language. The third was 61. Road name: Doctor. Former Navy corpsman. Vietnam era. He carried a medical bag in his saddlebag everywhere he rode, and he had used it more times than anyone who met him casually would ever guess. They walked into the lobby at 4:09 a.m. Doc stopped when he saw Raymond. He took in the jacket, the frame inside it, the hands around the coffee cup, the cracked skin, the careful grip. He took in the bruise at the temple, the drag of the left foot. The posture, Military, maintained through sheer discipline, even as everything else had been stripped away. Then he saw the patch on Raymond's jacket. Faded, but specific. "Corpsman," Doc said. Not a question. A recognition. One man identifying another across 50 years and a lobby floor. Raymond looked at him, at the cut he was wearing. "What years?" "69 to 71, Doc said. Different theater." He pulled up the chair next to Raymond and sat down with the unhurried ease of someone who has nowhere more important to be. "Let me take your vitals while my brothers talk to Carol. That all right with you?" Raymond nodded. His hands, Carol noticed, were trembling slightly. Not from cold, from the specific tremor of a body that has been running on adrenaline and discipline for 11 months and has just, in the last 40 minutes, been given permission, for the first time, to stop. Wire was already at the desk. He had the TV Guide cardboard in his gloved hand, examining it under the lobby light, not touching the text. Reading. "This is the original document?" he asked Carol. He pulled it from his jacket pocket. Wire looked at it for a long moment. "February," he said quietly, to no one in particular. Then he looked up. "I'm going to photograph this." He photographed it from 4 angles. Then he took out his legal pad and started writing without asking another question. He had not introduced himself, had not explained his background, had not asked Carol what she thought they should do. He had arrived, identified the evidence, and begun working. 24 years of financial crimes investigation does not require ceremony. What Derek Booker did not know, at 4:09 a.m. on a Tuesday, was that the man now photographing his words, the careful, incriminating handwritten words in a motel nightstand TV guide, had spent 24 years building exactly this kind of case, had put 61 people in federal prison, was not tired, was not out of practice, was, if anything, sharpened by purpose in the way that men are sharpened when their purpose walks through a door and sits down across from them. Bones was in the corner on his phone, voice low and even, speaking with a judge he had known for 22 years. Emergency guardianship petitions do not wait for office hours when a man has 19 days. Static, 34 years old, former Army signals, the youngest of the 4, had sat up in the chair nearest the window with his phone propped against the wall. He was documenting everything: the lobby, the time stamp, Raymond's condition, Carol's post, and its growing thread of responses. Evidence trail, social record, an account that could not be quietly disappeared. Doc looked at the thermometer reading, then at Raymond calmly. 95.8, he said. "You're starting mild hypothermia. Your blood sugar is also going to be a problem if your metformin hasn't been filled in months." He paused. "I'm calling an ambulance. Not because you're in crisis right now. You're not yet. But you need to be somewhere warm with a physician who can manage the diabetes through tonight. 2 more hours in this lobby, even with the heat cycling, and we'd be having a different conversation." Another pause. "Is that all right with you, sir?" Raymond looked at him for a long moment, the considered look of a man deciding, again after 11 months of having that trust systematically destroyed, whether to extend it one more time. "Yes," he said. "That's all right." Doc made the call. Then he sat back down and did not move from Raymond's side. 2 hours earlier, a woman in church clothing had looked at Raymond and seen a problem to redirect to the 211 line. She had meant well. She had looked at him and seen a category. These men looked at him and saw a person. Specifically this person. Specifically what this person needed tonight. The difference, Carol thought, watching them work. quiet, methodical, each one doing exactly what he was trained to do, was not small. It was everything. A power of attorney is one of the most powerful legal instruments a family can create, and one of the least regulated. Once granted, a POA agent can sell property, redirect income, control medical decisions, and access accounts with almost no oversight required. Elder law attorneys recommend what is called a springing POA, one that activates only under specific conditions verified by a physician and a separate financial monitor, a trusted third party who receives monthly statements. Raymond Earl Booker had neither. Millions of American seniors don't. Derek Booker had known that. He had built his entire plan around it. At 4:47 a.m., the sound came. Low first, distant, rolling down Highway 70 from the west like weather moving in. Then it grew, filling the cold Tennessee dark, a sound Carol felt in her sternum before she could clearly hear it. 142 motorcycles from Nashville and Knoxville arriving in formation, joining the 41 already parked in the Clearwater lot. Raymond stood up. He stood carefully, the measured stand of a man who has had shrapnel in his hip for 53 years and has learned to negotiate with it. He walked to the glass front door of the lobby, and he looked out at Highway 70. The formation filled the parking lot, the overflow lot across the road, the shoulder of the highway itself. Engines cutting off row by row, the sound diminishing in sequence until the last engine went quiet, and what replaced it was the particular kind of silence that 183 people standing still in the cold creates, which is not silence at all, but something heavier. 183 men in leather cuts, breath rising in the January air. Not one of them moving, not one of them shouting, not performing anything. Just present, decided. A wall that had chosen its side and intended to hold it. Raymond Earl Booker, Navy corpsman, Purple Heart recipient, a man who had carried the wounded out of a rocket attack while his own hip was shredded, put one flat hand against the cold glass of the front door. His eyes were full. "All of them," he said, very quietly. Carol stood beside him. "All of them." He stood there for a long time. Outside, nobody rushed. Nobody performed. They simply held the line the way you hold a line when the decision has already been made and doesn't need to be announced. Behind Raymond, Wire looked up from his legal pad. "I have enough to file tonight," he said, "and I'll be making calls when offices open in the morning. But Raymond—" He waited until Raymond turned around. "That note you wrote, every word you wrote down in that TV guide 6 weeks ago, because you knew you might need it someday." Wire held it up carefully. "This is evidence, real, admissible evidence. And when we find what I believe we are going to find in Derek's financial records, and we will find it, this piece of cardboard is going to be Exhibit A in a federal case." Raymond looked at the TV guide cardboard, the careful pencil words pressed hard into the page by a man who had run out of options and had not, even then, stopped paying attention. "What happens now?" he asked. Preacher stepped forward. Former Army chaplain, a man who had sat with the dying in 2 theaters of war and had never, in all of it, stopped believing there was something worth protecting. "Now," Preacher said, "we find out everything Derek has been doing, and then we make sure he answers for all of it." He paused. "And you are not going back to that room tonight, or any night. You are not alone anymore. That part is done." Raymond nodded once. the nod of a man accepting a fact rather than a favor. Outside, 183 men stood in the cold January dark, and inside, armed with a piece of TV guide cardboard and a legal pad and a Facebook post being shared across 4 counties, the Brotherhood got to work. What none of them knew yet, not Wire, not Preacher, not Carol, not Raymond, was that the story they were untangling was not one story. It was 2. And the second one was older and darker, and it involved someone who was already gone, and it would change everything about what happened next. Wire worked through the night. By 5:15 a.m., he had filled 11 pages of his legal pad. By 6:30, when the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's Financial Crimes Division opened for business, he had already drafted a summary document precise enough that the agent who answered the phone stayed on the line for 47 minutes without asking Wire to call back. Because Wire had done this before. 61 times before, to be exact. And every single time, it started the same way, with someone who thought they had been careful enough, and a paper trail that proved they hadn't been. Derek Allen Booker had not been careful enough. The first thread Wire pulled was the power of attorney itself, filed 14 months ago, 6 weeks after Dorothy's death, with a notarization that Wire flagged on the second read. The notary's license number. He wrote it down. He would check it in the morning. He had seen forged notarizations before. He had learned to check. The second thread was the VA pension routing. Raymond's $2,847 monthly benefit, direct deposited for 31 years to a personal account in Raymond's name, had been redirected 11 months ago to a joint account Raymond had no card for, no PIN for, and no record of opening. The authorization form bore Raymond's signature. Wire photographed the form Carol had helped Raymond locate on his phone, one of the few documents Derek had forwarded to Raymond's email, and looked at the signature for a long time. He wrote 3 words on his legal pad. Signature doesn't match. The third thread was the facility. Derek had told the VA, Adult Protective Services, and Raymond's neighbor Phyllis that Raymond had been enrolled at Millstone Senior Living in Cookeville, a real facility, well-regarded, properly licensed. Wire called their admissions line at 7:02 a.m. He identified himself and gave Raymond's full name and date of birth. The admissions coordinator was quiet for a moment. Then, "We have no record of a Raymond Earl Booker. Not current, not historical." Wire wrote that down too. By 8 a.m., Bones had filed the emergency guardianship petition. By 8:47, a judge Wire had worked with for 16 years had signed a temporary protective order removing Derek Booker's power of attorney, freezing all accounts he controlled under Raymond's name, and issuing a formal hold preventing Derek from leaving Putnam County pending investigation. The order was served at Derek's rental address at 9:23 a.m. When the 2 Cookeville PD officers and a TBI agent arrived at the address, a clean, well-maintained unit in the Ridgewood Apartments complex on the east side of town. Derek Booker answered the door in khaki slacks and a polo shirt, holding a travel mug of coffee. He had a lint roller on the kitchen counter behind him, visible through the open door. He appeared to be preparing for a showing. 3 printed property listings were spread on his kitchen table, annotated in his handwriting. He looked at the officers with the expression of a man who had been interrupted during a completely normal morning. "Can I help you?" he said. That expression, that specific ordinary confusion, was the face that elder abuse wears. Not menace, not calculation, just a man in a polo shirt holding a coffee mug, looking mildly inconvenienced, While in a hospital 2 miles away, his 71-year-old father was being treated for mild hypothermia and 6 months of unmanaged diabetes and a bruise on his left temple that had never been seen by a doctor. The TBI agent read Derek his rights there in the doorway. Derek's expression shifted through several phases in rapid succession. Confusion, then calculation, then something that tried to be calm and didn't quite get there. "I'd like to call my attorney," he said. "You'll have that opportunity," the agent said. "Sir, please turn around." They walked him to the vehicle in handcuffs, past the 3 property listings on his kitchen table, past the lint roller on the counter. At 9:31 a.m., Derek Allen Booker was placed in the back of a TBI vehicle outside Ridgewood Apartments. He was charged with criminal abandonment of a dependent adult, elder financial exploitation, a Class B felony in Tennessee, misuse of a benefits under federal statute, 38 U.S.C. Section 6107, fraudulent use of power of attorney, and filing a false report with a government agency relating to the Millstone enrollment documentation. 5 charges. The bail recommendation was set at $175,000. A man who had spent $38,000 on gambling debts in Tunica and $22,000 on personal travel and $14,500 on a truck using money that belonged to his father was not going to make $175,000 bail before the weekend. But here is what Wire found next. And this is the part that changed what kind of case it was. At 10:15 a.m., Wire sat in the Cookaville 5FW Post 5789 conference room with Bones and Preacher and a TBI financial crimes agent named Harriet Cole, a woman who had spent 19 years doing exactly what Wire had spent 24 doing, and who had the same look Wire had when she arrived, the focused, unhurried look of someone who recognizes a pattern and is following it back to its source. Wire had requested Derek's full financial records under the emergency order. They arrived electronically at 10:08 a.m. He had been reading for 7 minutes when he stopped. He turned his laptop screen so Harriet Cole could see it. "There," he said. It was an insurance policy. Not the $310,000 policy on Raymond. They had already found that, taken out 8 months ago under Derek's POA authority, Raymond listed as insured, Derek as sole beneficiary. This was an older policy. Filed in the same folder in Derek's cloud storage, in a subfolder labeled Settled Accounts. The insured was Dorothy Mae Booker. Policy value, $187,000. Taken out 18 months before Dorothy's death, under Derek's signature as co-applicant, with Dorothy's signature below his. A signature that Wire now looked at the way he had looked at Raymond's signature on the account redirect form. He wrote 3 words again on his legal pad. Signature doesn't match. The policy had paid out 11 days after Dorothy's death. The death certificate listed heart failure. The attending physician was a Dr. Clement Warga, a name that did not appear in any Tennessee medical licensing database that Wire could find in the next 4 minutes of searching. Harriet Cole was already on her phone. Raymond's neighbor Louise Tran had known Dorothy for 19 years. She was 71 herself, a small, precise woman who had arrived at the VFW post at 9 a.m. when Preacher called, before she even knew exactly what she was being asked. She had been waiting for someone to ask for 11 months. Dorothy was not a sick woman, Louise said. Her hands were folded on the table. They did not shake. She had been holding this for too long to shake. Her last independent checkup, before Derek took over her medical decisions, she was healthy. I drove her there. I sat in the waiting room. Her doctor told her she had the cardiovascular profile of a woman 10 years younger. She paused. 8 months later, she was gone. Under the care of a doctor none of us had ever met, and Derek wouldn't let her sister Patricia visit in the last month, said Dorothy was too tired for company. She looked at Wire directly. I knew something was wrong. I told myself I was imagining it, that Derek was just managing a difficult situation. Her voice was level, precise, the voice of a woman delivering a verdict on herself. I convinced myself someone else would ask the right questions. A doctor, a social worker, someone official. A pause. I was wrong to wait. I've known that for 26 months. Sandra Kearns had worked with Dorothy at Cookville Elementary School for 11 years. Dorothy in the front office, Sandra in the 4th grade classroom. She was 52, and she came into the room with the specific energy of someone who had filed a report that went nowhere and has been angry about it ever since. The last time I saw Dorothy was at a grocery store, 4 months before she died, Sandra said. She looked frightened. Not ill, frightened. There's a difference, and I know the difference. I asked her how she was, and she started to say something, and then she looked toward the door and stopped. Sandra's jaw was tight. Derek was in the next aisle. She could see him through the shelving. A beat. I reported it to Adult Protective Services, submitted a formal concern. I received a letter 6 weeks later saying the case had been reviewed and closed. No further action warranted. She set a copy of the letter on the table. She had kept it. I kept it because I knew someday somebody was going to need it. Frank Odom had commanded VFW Post 5789 for 8 years. He was 76, and he sat with the stillness of a man who has spent a lifetime in the company of hard facts. Derek gave us a new contact number for Raymond 14 months ago, Frank said. Said Raymond's old phone had been lost, gave us the new one. I called it twice. Got a voicemail that said Raymond's name and nothing else. Left messages. No callbacks. He looked at his hands. We received a Christmas card in December, signed from Raymond and Derek. Handwritten note inside. Said Raymond was doing well, settling into a new routine. Appreciated our thoughts. Frank paused. I have known Raymond Earl Booker for 22 years. I have received handwritten notes from Raymond for 19 of those years. He looked up. That was not Raymond's handwriting. I should have acted on that. I did not. And I will carry that for the rest of my life. He set the Christmas card on the table beside Sandra's letter. Wire looked at the 2 documents, then at Harriet Cole. Here is what the evidence showed, assembled in that conference room by 11:30 a.m. Derek Booker had assumed control of his mother's medical decisions 5 months before her death, citing confusion that her longtime physician, the one who told Louise Tran she had the cardiovascular profile of a woman 10 years younger, had never documented. A doctor no one could now locate had signed her death certificate, and $187,000 insurance policy had been collected 11 days later. 26 months after that, Derek had moved into his father's home under the cover of grief, had obtained power of attorney in the fog of loss, had redirected $2,847 a month for 11 months, $31,317 in total, into accounts Raymond could not access, had sold Raymond's home of 31 years and pocketed the proceeds, had taken out a $310,000 life insurance policy on Raymond 8 months ago, had told every institution that tried to check on Raymond, the VA, Adult Protective Services, the VFW, a different lie, tailored to what each one needed to hear, and had driven Raymond to a highway motel on a January night when the temperature was heading toward single digits, left him there with $23 and 4% battery, and waited for February. The total financial damage to Raymond alone: $31,317 in redirected pension, $214,000 in home equity, unaccounted. Medical costs resulting from 6 months of unmanaged diabetes and deliberate neglect still being calculated. Against that, Derek's documented expenditures: $38,000 in gambling debts, $22,000 in personal travel, $14,500 for a truck. The math of a man who had looked at his father's life and seen a resource to be liquidated. What Derek Booker had not calculated was a night clerk with a Facebook page and 4,000 followers. Had not calculated that one of those followers would know a man named Preacher. Had not calculated that Preacher would know Wire. Had not calculated that a folded piece of TV guide cardboard, carried in a jacket pocket for 6 weeks by a man who had spent 2 tours learning that documentation saves lives, would be sitting in a TBI evidence bag by 10 a.m. He had not calculated that the system would fail Raymond. It had 4 times completely. But that what came after the system was not nothing. What came after the system was 183 men who had arrived at 4:47 a.m. in formation on Highway 70 and were still there at noon. Not because anyone told them to stay, but because no one had told them Raymond was safe yet. At 12:07 p.m., Preacher walked to the entrance of Cookeville Regional Medical Center, where Raymond was being treated in the internal medicine ward. He stood in the doorway of Raymond's room. Raymond was propped up in the hospital bed, an IV in his left arm, the 31-year-old jacket folded on the chair beside him. "He's in custody," Preacher said. 5 charges. $175,000 bail. He's not going anywhere. Raymond was quiet for a moment. "Dorothy," he said, "you think he—" "We don't know yet," Preacher said. "But we're going to find out. All of it. We're not stopping until we find out all of it." Raymond nodded. He reached over to the folded jacket, touched the electrical tape on the left elbow. "I wrote it down," he said. "I didn't know if anyone would ever read it, but I wrote it down." "You wrote it down," Preacher said, "and someone read it." Outside, down the hall, through the hospital windows facing east, you could hear it faintly, the low, idling rumble of motorcycles in the parking lot. 183 men, still present, still holding the line. Not because it was dramatic, because that's what the code said. You don't leave until your brother is safe. And Raymond Earl Booker, Navy Corpsman, Purple Heart, a man the system had failed 4 times without blinking, was not yet safe. But he was no longer alone. And that, for now, was the beginning of everything. The hospital discharged Raymond Earl Booker on January 18th, 4 days after Carol Dupree sat down across from him in a $49 a night motel lobby and refused to look away. His core temperature had normalized within 6 hours of admission. His blood sugar had taken longer. 3 days of careful management, adjusted insulin protocol, a diabetes specialist named Dr. Anita Pham, who spent 40 minutes with Raymond on the second morning not reviewing charts, but simply talking to him, asking him questions, listening to the answers. Raymond told her afterward that it was the first medical appointment in 8 months where someone had directed their words at him rather than around him. His weight was 139 pounds. The target Dr. Pham set was 168. She called it a project, not a crisis. She said, "We have time now. We're going to do this right. Doc came every day. He sat in the chair beside Raymond's bed the way he had sat in the lobby chair, unhurried, present, bringing coffee from the hospital cafeteria that was marginally better than the burnt pot at the Clearwater front desk. On the second day, they compared service records in the specific, careful way that Vietnam-era veterans compare records, not for drama, but for the private mathematics of it, working out who was where and when, the geography of a war that had shaped both of them in ways neither had ever fully described to anyone who wasn't there. Raymond had been at Quang Tri in April 1971. Doc had been at Da Nang. Different theater, as Doc had said, but the same training. The same code you run toward the wounded. On the third morning, Doc brought someone else. His road name was Founding Father. He was 71 years old, Raymond's exact age to the month. He had served in Vietnam with the Army's 1st Cavalry Division, 1969 to 1971. He walked into Raymond's hospital room, and the two men looked at each other across the room for a moment without speaking. The specific recognition of men who have shared a category of experience that cannot be explained to anyone outside it. Then Founding Father pulled up a chair. "You play chess?" he asked. "Used to," Raymond said. "Then we'll start again." Founding Father set a travel chess set on the bedside tray. "I come every Thursday to the VFW. You'll come too, when you're ready. But we can start here." They played for 2 hours. Raymond won the first game. Founding Father won the second. They agreed the third was a draw, which Founding Father disputed at length, which made Raymond laugh. The first time Carol, who was visiting on her lunch break, had heard him laugh. It was not a large laugh. It was the careful, slightly surprised laugh of a man rediscovering that he still could. The question of where Raymond would go had been answered by Bones within 36 hours of the arrest. Bones had spent 30 years in elder law. He had seen the housing piece destroy cases that the legal piece had won, people rescued from abusive situations only to be placed in inadequate ones, the relief of rescue evaporating into a different kind of precariousness. He did not allow that to happen when he could prevent it. He called Frank Odom at the VFW on the morning of January 15th. "Raymond needs a place," Bones said. "Clean, safe, ground level if possible, near medical. He's going to need PT for the hip. He needs to be somewhere his community can reach him." Frank was quiet for a moment. Then, "I know a place. Let me make some calls." The place was a 2-bedroom unit at Ridgecrest Veterans Housing, a non-profit complex on the north side of Cookeville, specifically built for veterans over 65, subsidized through a combination of VA housing assistance and a private foundation grant. There was a waiting list. There was always a waiting list. Frank Odom called the director of Ridgecrest at 8 a.m. and explained Raymond's situation in the precise, unembellished way that Frank Odom explained things. The director called back at 11 a.m. A unit had become available, a ground-floor 2-bedroom, east-facing heating system fully functional, no cycling. Raymond moved in on January 22nd. The Cookeville chapter provided the move. This did not take long. Raymond's possessions, in total, were 1 bag, 1 jacket, and a TV guide piece of cardboard now in a TBI evidence bag. What the brothers provided instead was furniture, sourced over 4 days from donations called in across 3 chapters. A bed frame, a mattress, a kitchen table with 2 chairs, a recliner that Static had driven 2 hours to collect from a Nashville brother who'd been meaning to replace it. A lamp. Dishes. A coat rack by the door. Wire had worked with the VA to restore Raymond's pension access within 72 hours of the POA being dissolved, an emergency processing that Wire had requested personally, invoking a provision that most VA representatives had never been asked to use. The first corrected deposit, $2,847, landed in Raymond's own account on January 19th. Raymond looked at the balance on his phone screen for a long time. Then he put the phone down. He did not cry. He just sat very still for a moment, the way you sit when something you thought was gone has been returned, and you are not yet sure how to hold it. Static had created a private Facebook group called Raymond's Watch, 41 members, all Cookeville chapter brothers, rotating check-ins scheduled for every third day. Not intrusive, not performative, just someone always knowing where Raymond was and how he was doing, so that the specific, particular darkness of being invisible could not descend again. The legal case moved with the methodical momentum of a case that had been built correctly from the ground up. The TBI's investigation into Dorothy's death was formally opened on January 20th. Dr. Clement Warga, the physician whose name appeared on Dorothy's death certificate, was identified as a former medical resident whose license had been suspended in 2018 for fraudulent documentation and had never been reinstated. He was located in Memphis on January 31st. He was charged separately: fraudulent practice of medicine and filing a false death certificate. His cooperation agreement with prosecutors, signed February 8th, included full disclosure of his arrangement with Derek Booker. $11,000 paid in cash for a death certificate that asked no questions. Dorothy Mae Booker's body was exhumed by court order on February 3rd. The forensic pathologist's preliminary report, completed February 17th, identified physiological indicators inconsistent with natural cardiac death. A formal finding was pending full toxicological analysis. Derek Booker's original 5 charges became 9. The additional charges: conspiracy to commit homicide, Dorothy Mae Booker; elder financial exploitation, Dorothy Mae Booker; fraudulent procurement of a death certificate, obstruction of a government investigation. His bail, already set at $175,000, was revoked entirely on February 4th following the homicide conspiracy charge. He was remanded to Putnam County Jail pending trial. A man in khaki slacks and a polo shirt, carrying a lint roller, who had spent 14 months believing he had been careful enough, was in a jail cell on the night the $310,000 insurance policy was supposed to clear. The policy, frozen by court order since January 15th, was voided by the insurer on February 9th under fraud provisions. February came and went. Raymond Earl Booker was alive. 5 things Carol Dupree did right that night, and that anyone can do. She stayed. She didn't call for help and disengage. She sat down across from a man who had been made invisible, and she stayed present until he was no longer alone. She documented. She photographed the lobby, Raymond's condition, the timestamps, the TV guide cardboard before anyone else touched it. She understood, without being trained to, that evidence is what separates an account from a record. She used her network first, not the official channels. Those had already failed Raymond 4 times. She used the people she actually knew, the 4,000 neighbors who were awake at 3 a.m., and one of whom knew a man named Preacher. She didn't confront Derek. She did not call Derek. She did not warn Derek. She let the law do that, and she let it do it properly. She believed Raymond. She did not ask him to prove it. She did not suggest alternative explanations. She read the words in that TV guide, and she believed the man who wrote them. That single decision, to believe a 71-year-old man sitting alone at 3 a.m. with cracked hands and a rubber band holding his boot together, is what made everything else possible. If you believe a veteran deserved better than this, if you believe anyone does, these are the tools you already have. You don't need a badge, you don't need a legal degree, you need a chair, a cup of coffee, and the willingness to stay. National Elder Fraud. Hotline 1-833-FRAUD-11. Adult Protective Services in every state. Elder Care, ACL Gov. If a veteran is involved, VA benefits. Fraud Hotline 1-800-827-1000. 8 months later. September in Cookeville, Tennessee. And the heat had finally broken. One of those first September evenings, when the air comes back to something bearable. When people remember why they chose to live in a place that summers the way Tennessee summers. The Cookeville VFW Post. 5789 had not hosted an event this large since its 40th anniversary dinner in 2019. Tables had been moved, extra chairs sourced. Someone had strung lights across the back wall that Frank Odom had initially called unnecessary and then privately admitted looked good. Raymond Earl Booker stood at the front of the room in a collared shirt, blue, pressed, the kind of shirt you wear when you want to look like yourself on a good day. He weighed 164 pounds, 4 pounds short of Dr. Pham's target, which she had revised upward once it became clear that Raymond was the kind of patient who did the physical therapy homework, walked the recommended 2 miles every morning without being reminded, and showed up to every appointment 12 minutes early. His left hip still gave him trouble. It always would. 53 years of shrapnel don't resolve. But he walked into that room without leaning on anything. And he stood at the front of it with the posture he'd been born with and had never entirely lost, even at his worst. The TV guide cardboard was not in his jacket pocket tonight. It was on the wall behind him, framed in simple black, mounted at eye level between the Post's founding charter and a photograph from 1987. The careful pencil handwriting was visible through the glass. Beneath it, a small placard. Exhibit A, State of Tennessee versus Derek Allen Booker. Entered into evidence, January 15th. Below that, in smaller type, Raymond wrote this down because he believed someone would eventually read it. He was right. The numbers told part of the story. In the 8 months since Raymond's rescue, the partnership between Preacher's 3 Tennessee chapters and the VA's regional office had been formalized into a program called the Watchman Initiative, a veteran welfare coordination network, the first of its kind in the state. When the VA identified a veteran at risk for elder abuse or abandonment, a Watchman coordinator was notified, not for confrontation, not for intimidation, for presence, documentation, and connection to the kind of community accountability that official systems alone could not provide. 17 at-risk veterans had been connected to the Watchman Initiative in its first 8 months. 11 had been removed from harmful situations. 6 had been relocated to stable housing. All 17 were alive. Bones had trained 4 elder law attorneys in the expedited guardianship petition process he had used for Raymond. The average time from filing to temporary order in those 4 cases was 3 hours and 22 minutes. The State Bar Association had requested a presentation. Wire had testified before a Tennessee legislative committee in March about POA fraud vulnerability in the state's elder population. A bill strengthening oversight requirements for POA financial activity, the kind of oversight that would have flagged Derek's account redirections within 90 days, was in committee. It had bipartisan support. It had a name that did not include Raymond's name, because Raymond had asked that it not. "Name it for Dorothy," he had said. "She didn't get the ending. Give her the law." Frank Odom introduced Raymond that September evening with the brevity that Frank brought to everything. 3 sentences, no preamble, no performance. The room was quiet by the time Raymond stepped to the microphone. He looked out at the faces. Carol, in the 3rd row, still in her work clothes from the Clearwater day shift she'd picked up to trade for tonight off. Doc, to her left. Founding Father, beside Doc, the travel chess set in his jacket pocket because he brought it everywhere now. Wire, in the back, legal pad visible from force of habit. Bones beside Wire, talking quietly with a woman Raymond recognized as the director of Ridgecrest Veterans Housing. Static in the corner, phone up, documenting. Not for social media tonight, but for Raymond's own record, because Raymond had asked him to. Preacher, standing near the door. The same position he had taken in the Clearwater lobby. Not blocking it, just present. And Louise Tran, in the front row, who had known Dorothy for 19 years, and who had driven Raymond to 3 of his last 4 medical appointments because she had decided, quietly and without announcement, that she was not going to be the person who waited for someone else to ask the right question ever again. Raymond held the microphone for a moment. "I survived Quang Tri Province in 1971, he said. "I survived the rocket attack that put shrapnel in my hip that I'll carry until I die. I survived Dorothy passing, which I genuinely did not expect to survive." He paused. "And I almost didn't survive my own son's plan for February." The room was completely still. "The reason I'm standing here is not that I was strong enough to escape. I wasn't. I had $23 and 4% battery and a rubber band holding my boot together." He looked down for a moment, then back up. "The reason I'm standing here is that a woman I had never met sat down across from me at 3 a.m. and decided to stay. And that decision, that one decision, started a chain that I could not have started myself." He looked at Carol. She looked back at him steadily, reading glasses on their beaded chain, the particular expression of a woman who has been thanked enough and is waiting for the part that matters. "She didn't know what was going to happen when she posted that message," Raymond said. "She didn't know Preacher would respond. Didn't know Wire existed. Didn't know that what I had in my jacket pocket was admissible evidence that would result in 9 criminal charges." He paused. "She just knew that a man was sitting alone in her lobby at 3 a.m. and that she had a chair and a cup of coffee and the willingness to stay." He was quiet for a moment. "That's the whole story," he said. "Everything else, the 183 brothers on Highway 70, the TBY investigation, the guardianship petition, February coming and going while Derek sat in a cell, all of it follows from one woman who sat down and didn't leave." Outside the VFW post, the September evening moved through the parking lot. The motorcycles were lined up along the east side of the building. Not 183 tonight, but 41. The Cookville chapter. The ones who had been first, and who came every Thursday to the post now, as a matter of standing habit. Inside, Raymond reached into his shirt pocket. He produced a piece of paper, folded but clean. Not worn. New. "I wrote something else down," he said. "Not evidence this time, just something I want people to have." He unfolded it. If you have ever felt invisible, someone sees you. If you have ever felt like the systems that were supposed to protect you have failed you, you are not wrong, and you are not done. If you are sitting somewhere right now, a lobby, a waiting room, a house that doesn't feel like yours anymore, and you are waiting for someone to notice, please don't wait for someone official. Official failed me 4 times. He looked up from the paper. Tell anyone. Tell the person at the front desk. Tell the neighbor who keeps looking at you funny. Tell the person at the diner who refills your coffee without being asked. Tell whoever is in front of you. Because the chain starts with one person deciding to believe you, and that person is not always the one you expect. He folded the paper, put it back in his pocket. Pay attention, he said, to the person in the corner chair who keeps looking at the door, to the neighbor whose mail is piling up, to the parent whose adult child answers every question directed at them. Ask the uncomfortable question. Believe the uncomfortable answer. Stay when it would be easier to redirect someone to a hotline and go back to your audit. He paused. Because there are Raymond Bookers everywhere. There are Dorothys everywhere. And the difference between a person who disappears and a person who doesn't is almost never a government program or an official intervention. He looked out at the room. It is almost always one person, in an ordinary place, who decided to sit down and stay. The applause started in the front row and built. Raymond stood at the microphone and let it come. The way you let something come when you have earned it, and you know it, and you no longer need to minimize it. Founding Father caught his eye from the 3rd row and raised an imaginary chess piece with 2 fingers. A private joke, 6 weeks in the making. Raymond shook his head slightly, the way you shake your head at someone you have decided to keep in your life. Carol was not clapping. She was sitting with her hands folded in her lap, watching Raymond the way you watch someone when you are quietly, privately, deeply glad that a Tuesday night in January went the way it went. The TV guide cardboard on the wall behind Raymond caught the light. The policy clears in February. February had come. February had gone. Raymond Earl Booker, Navy Corpsman, Purple Heart recipient, husband for 44 years, a man who had carried the wounded out of a rocket attack in 1971 and had carried this particular weight alone for 11 months, was standing at a microphone in September, 4 pounds from his target weight, with a chess rival and a Thursday standing appointment and a ground-floor apartment with a heating system that did not cycle. He was not healed. Healing doesn't work that way, and Raymond knew better than most what things you carry for life and what things you learn to carry differently. But he was seen. He was present. He was here. And the jacket with the electrical tape on the elbow was on the coat rack by his door at Ridgecrest, right where he left it every night when he came home. This story is not really about motorcycles or leather cuts or 183 engines on a January highway. It is about the distance between seeing and acting, between knowing something is wrong and deciding that wrong is your problem to address, even when no one has officially assigned it to you. Even when it is 3 a.m. and you have an audit to finish, and the easiest thing in the world would be to point someone toward a shelter hotline and go back to your desk. Carol Dupree chose the harder thing. Not because she was trained to, not because it was in her job description, because she had a son who had needed someone to stay. And she knew, in the specific bone-level way that experience teaches, what staying meant. There are Carol Dupree in every building, every diner, every pharmacy, every hardware store, every bus route, every neighborhood. People who have learned something the hard way and carry that knowledge quietly, waiting for the moment it becomes useful to someone else. And there are Raymond Bookers everywhere, sitting in corner chairs in lobbies and waiting rooms and houses that no longer feel like theirs, waiting for someone who said they'd be right back, carrying the handwritten evidence of what they know, because they have not yet stopped believing that eventually someone will read it. The systems will fail. They failed Raymond 4 times, completely, consequentially, without accountability. The systems will fail again. They are failing someone right now. What comes after the systems is not nothing. What comes after the systems is the person in front of you. So, pay attention. Notice when someone's story doesn't add up. Notice when a parent you used to see regularly has disappeared behind an adult child who answers every question for them. Notice when the Christmas card doesn't look right. Ask the uncomfortable question. File the report even when you think it won't go anywhere, because Sandra Kearns kept her copy, and it mattered. Drive to the old house even when you expect to find new owners, because Frank Odom kept the false Christmas card, and it mattered. Write it down in a TV guide with a pencil stub and carry it in your jacket for 6 weeks, because Raymond wrote it down, and it became Exhibit A. You don't need 183 motorcycles to start this. You need a chair and the willingness to sit down. If this story moved you, subscribe to Valiant Bikers and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Comment below. I stand with Raymond. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us about the person in your life who sat down and stayed when it mattered. Because there are more stories like this. More veterans who need advocates. More people sitting in corner chairs. More chances to be the person who makes the call, or pulls up a chair, or simply stays. Raymond's story has a good ending. Make sure the next one does too.